That's right, Katie. Thanks for those weather updates. Welcoming in our next live guest, we have Lauren Began, the maritime professor. Lauren, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me. It's always great to be here with you.
So, Lauren, we're excited to get to chat with you today because we have some changes that are happening within the maritime space, and there are some revisions or some changes or shifts that have happened with the Ocean Reform, Shipping Reform Act. Can you get into the first one that we have that's already been out, and that's we're going to be around unreasonable refusal to deal with respect to vessel space, and that one's already been out. Can you talk to that one a little bit?
Yeah, that's right. So the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, we've talked about this a lot. It was the new law that was modifying the Shipping Act. So the Ocean Shipping Reform Act came out June 16th this summer. With it, there was some kind of immediate things that happened. We found charge complaints, which is a new way for dispute resolution with the FMC, the Federal Maritime Commission. We also had some rulemakings come out from that. And so, or the FMC was told by Congress, hey guys, time to do some rulemakings. So we've had three that we've really been watching. And the first one is this unreasonable refusal to deal or negotiate with respect to vessel space. Now, what this one really was doing is getting at the kind of the problem of a lot of exporters specifically, but this was also a problem for importers, but exporters specifically were kind of being like locked out or just they couldn't even get somebody to answer the phone on trying to negotiate on, I'd like to move some exports, please. And nobody's on the other line. So this rulemaking is really trying to get at, look, you can't unreasonably refuse to deal or negotiate. And one of the most interesting things from this rulemaking, that you're right, it closed, last Friday, October 21st, all the comments on it. But really interesting from this rulemaking is it tried to define reasonable. Okay, that gets into like law, reasonable, trying to define these otherwise common terms. But one of the examples the FMC gave for what is a reasonable refusal and what isn't, they said an unreasonable refusal would be a blanket blockout, a blanket, saying we will not be taking exports. And so they said basically, if you do a full, a blanket, denial, we're going to call that a blanket unreasonable action.
Totally understandable, right? They just say, you know what, we're refusing to deal with you. That would absolutely be unreasonable. And it's interesting and really kind of great of the FMC now to say, hey, we're going to provide a true definition of what this is. Lauren, let's move on to our second rulemaking. And this one is still open for comment, has yet to come out yet. But we are talking about detention and demurrage, which I think has been kind of the most hot button issue that people have been wanting the FMC to solve, especially from the shipper and the carrier standpoint, right? People are saying, it's ridiculous that I have to pay these detention and demurrage fees. But on the flip side, you've got the port saying, you know what, it's ridiculous that we can't get these containers moved, right? So we're going to need to impose these fees. Who's right? Who's wrong? Where's the FMC landing on these issues?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good synopsis of kind of what's happening. And so detention demurrage, everybody's really like diving in on this, right? Because that's it. So the FMC, this rulemaking that's currently open is kind of like a multi-part effort. So the FMC started looking at detention demurrage last spring. We've talked about that a lot, I think, on here. It was the advance notice of proposed rulemaking. So the FMC sent questions out to the industry and was like, here's what we're thinking. You guys like 30-day invoice time periods? Do you want the MTOs, the marine terminal operators, the ports, to be part of this regulation? Do you not? What are you guys thinking? And so they got over 80 comments, which was great because it just showed this is a hot button issue. And then Congress, got involved over the summer with OSRA and was like, hey, FMC, you guys should do a rulemaking on detention and demurrage. And they were like, we are. So then you get Congress basically saying, okay, you got to go do this. And then in the meantime, we kind of had some invoicing detention demurrage requirements that came out from OSRA too. So those were turned into law. And then the third thing that is part of this current rulemaking that's kind of going back in the historical perspective here is they put out an interpretive rule. So not a full rule, but just kind of like an interpretation in May of 2020. So everything shut down in March. 2 months later, things started going crazy, and here comes this report out of the FMC saying, here's how we interpret detention and demurrage. They basically said D&D should be used for incentivization purpose. So if it's not actually helping to move the cargo, it shouldn't be charged. And so that's what they were saying. And so that was picked up by OSRA. OSRA basically turned that interpretation into an actual reg that's in the books now. And so now we have the proposal from the FMC. That's kind of the culmination of all those efforts. So it's the notice of proposed rulemaking. And what they've done here is they've proposed some language. Instead of having those questions out to the industry, what do you guys think? Now they're saying, here's what we're thinking for the language. What do you guys think about this? And so that just opened on the 13th and will be open until December 13th.
And Lauren, what's next after, now it's open, they get to have it out there, then get some comments on what they think about it. What's the timeline here? There's going to be, times for comments, then some revisions potentially made, and then they come back with another swing at it. What's that look like?
Yeah, so this one, they have to finish up in a year. So they have from OSRA. So they have until June 16th, 2023 to actually finish this one up. Rulemakings can kind of be a laborious process. They can take a little while. But this one is open for comment for 60 days. Pretty much all rulemakings that they've had recently have been about 30 days. A few of them have gotten an extension, but this one was a nice 60-day window. Don't forget, we have some holidays in there, so you're not looking at a real true 60 days. But we knew this one was coming, and so what then happens? They'll pull together all the comments that they received, and I really encourage everybody. I mean, even motor carriers are listed and mentioned in this rule in the proposed text. But I really recommend everybody comments if you have an interest in this. But so it closes December 13th. They'll take probably a month or two, maybe a few more. To kind of summarize all the comments that they've received, and then they'll turn it into a final rule. And what that will be is, this is the text we're going to go with. Absent any major objections, this is going to be it. So this is kind of our moment to really lean in and affect what the rule will ultimately be.
From the motor carrier standpoint, I think there could be a hesitancy for motor carriers to say, this doesn't really involve me, but it does, right? Because also included in this proposal is now this language that could absolve motor carriers from having to pay the actual payments for their cargo, right? And keep it between the billed and the billing parties. That's going to be where the contractual relationship would be. So when you're looking for, if you're a motor carrier and you're saying, this ain't my problem, it actually is. You should care about it a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I think drayage providers have really found this to be a sticking point, right? I mean, so what the FMC says in the proposed language is, look, we want this to just be direct contractual. We want the billing party and the billed party on these detention and demurrage invoices to have some idea about what's in the term, like what this should actually cover. So they're basically saying, look, the shipper and the carrier should be the only ones involved here that are required to pay. And that's kind of getting at two different problems. One, the invoices were going out to like 3 or 4 different people. You get an invoice, you pay it because you're like, I don't want to mess this up. Some of these invoices were getting double, triple paid. And of course they weren't saying, oh no, you've already paid this, So that was a problem point. But then also, so the motor carriers, they'd show up and they'd pay it, but they didn't know if anything was funky. They didn't know if anything was off. They just were trying to do their double turn. They had an empty sitting on their chassis. Now they're trying to dump the empty and come in for an import. And they don't know if anything's off. So what the FMC is basically saying here is, look, the motor carrier, you don't have to pay it, but you can pay it. But they're removing the motor carrier from having to pay it, like the must pay it. I don't know how this is going to work operationally, because a lot of times invoices are already, you have to pay it before you even show up. And so, maybe the trucker gets there and some ports have like a 48-hour waiting window after payment. So I think there needs to be an update across the board for the ports that don't have that, and ports and terminals that don't have that immediate notice of payment. Like, let's get Venmo, let's get PayPal in these ports, right? I mean, not exactly, but that kind of thing where it's a little more immediate. So, I think that's really going to, I think it's going to shift the industry here. I think that this really has some good potential to help clean things up, right?
Sounds like someone needs a freight tech immediate payment solution that is out on the market, like the 18 million that are out there right now, right?
Right.
Lauren, let's talk a little bit about timeline really quickly before we let you go. When can we start to see the actual rulemakings and provisions being put into effect and actually see those effects coming out of them? Is it kind of just like a wait and see thing, like they'll judge it as it comes, or will there be a time where it flips and people need to be in compliance with these rules?
Yeah, I mean, so once that final rule publishes, that will be like the effective date. How long it's going to be before we get to that effective date, each rule kind of has their own timeline of when it must be done. So that first rule, the unreasonable refusal to deal or with respect to vessel space, that actually has to be a final rule published by December 16th. It had a 6-month requirement. So December 16th, 6 months from June 16th from the OSRA. So that one we'll see. I mean, we're probably going to see some movement on that in the next month, really 2 months, so that'll be great. We'll see what the final rule comes out to be. There were some really interesting comments filed on that rule, so it'll be interesting to see what the FMC can do in the next 5 to 6 weeks by the time they need to publish this final rule. This detention and demurrage, like I said, it closes up on December 13th. I really, really hope we get some great comments on here. They do want to help. The Federal Maritime Commission regulates the ocean industry for the benefit of the U.S. consumer, importer, and exporter. They want to help. So they're going to take these comments, they're going to chew on them, look them over. Does this match up? Is this going to make it easier or more burdensome? I think we're going to find that it's going to make it easier. But like I said, that one doesn't have to be done until June 16th next year. They have a lot going on. They really want to get this done, but there's a lot of really got to get this done stuff on their to-do list. So we'll see. I would expect over the next 6 months we're going to see some movements, but we're also seeing the pendulum swing. Right, it was over on the carrier side for a while. It's starting to swing back over to the shipper side, the spot market rates. That's not the same as the contract rate, the service contract rate, which I think is what people are waiting to see come down. But it's great that the spot market rates are coming down. So I think we're going to see some good activity over the next 6 months. Within a year, it's going to be a different world.
Amazing and insightful as always. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we'll be sure to follow up with you as this continues to develop.
Thank you so much. Great to see you guys.
And you can catch Lauren and her Maritime Professor podcast up on LinkedIn. Right now, we're going to head on over to Isaiah Buchanan. He's got our first check of what's trending on social media.